Ladies and gentlemen, I was made aware of a TikTok video the other day showing a man having his rights violated during a traffic stop, or at least that's what the person who took the video wanted people to think. But there are some immediate concerns with the video that I have. First, TikTok does not allow videos that are more than 3 minutes in length, which is rarely enough time for the full context of the traffic stop, of the law enforcement interaction, of the situation in general. Is it good? Is it bad? Hard to tell with just 3 minutes, usually. Second, we don't really get a good view of the police officer in this video, which raises the question, is this a real interaction with law enforcement? Now, I'm not saying it's fake. I'm not saying that the filmer intentionally omitted information, but I have come across those issues before, both omission and 100% faked videos. The video starts with the officer handing the driver a piece of paper, which may or may not be a ticket, and asking him if there were any illegal drugs, open containers, large amounts of U.S. money, bombs, guns, hand grenades, terrorists, or dead bodies. As someone who has asked those questions, it is easy for me to dismiss this potentially as the officer having a bit of cheeky fun. But you don't usually have those kinds of questions, cheeky or not, go that in depth outside of international borders or military installations. According to the filmer, this took place in Goodwell, Oklahoma, right near the Texas border, and it wouldn't surprise me to discover that that officer had worked in immigration and border control based on his proximity to the U.S.-Mexican border. The smoothness with which he asked the questions is indicative of experience asking them, and when you combine that with his statement, "It's what I do every single day, I search cars," it makes me think that maybe this guy has a little bit of training and experience in determining signs of contraband smuggling, either through determining suspicious behavior or perhaps vehicle modification. This will be important in a bit. The filmer refuses the search, which is his right, and the officer informs him that he has a canine and will conduct an open-air search around the vehicle, which the officer is allowed to do. Now, some of you might be screaming at me, "But Blue, what about Rodriguez versus United States?" And we'll get there, bear with me. Good call, though. The filmer asks if he's being detained. The officer says yes. The filmer asks why, and the officer says, "Because I said so." He does eventually give a reason, but "because I said so" is his first response. The comment section went nuts over this, and I want to remind you all that an officer is not required to tell you the reason for the stop. However, most departments have implemented a policy that officers tell you when it is safe or reasonable to do so, because it reduces the amount of time they have to spend dealing with complaints. Yes, they have to have a valid reason, and if they don't tell you, it's pretty easy to file a complaint being like, "Oh, I don't think they had a reason," and the department has to waste time and resources being like, "Yes, they did, here it is." So it just kind of makes sense to have the officer give the reason at the stop if it is safe or reasonable to do so. There is not usually, to my knowledge, a legal requirement. Personally, my department's policy was to explain the stop after we had identifying documents in our hands, in case the driver fled after learning the reason for the stop, which reduced the need to conduct a potentially dangerous pursuit. Because why would we pursue them? We know where they live. Alternatively, we were authorized to wait until handing the ticket back to the driver to explain what the stop was for. But the ticket was handed back to the driver, so doesn't that mean that the stop is over? One police officer in the comments section certainly thought so, claiming that the stop was over the moment the ticket touched the driver's hands, but unfortunately for him, he's wrong. The detention stops when the officer says it stops. However, the stop is no longer lawful if it unreasonably extends past the initial traffic stop. The key word here is unreasonably. See, the Fourth Amendment allows reasonable searches and seizures, but wait. Didn't the Supreme Court determine in Rodriguez versus the United States that bringing a dog to sniff a car after the ticket and documents were handed back to the driver was an unreasonable extension of the detention? No, actually, regardless of what the officer on TikTok might want you to think. The Supreme Court stated, "The critical question then is not whether the dog sniff occurs before or after the officer issues a ticket, but whether conducting the sniff prolongs, i.e. adds time to, the stop. The question whether reasonable suspicion of criminal activity justified detaining Rodriguez beyond completion of the traffic infraction investigation therefore remains open for Eighth Circuit consideration on remand." Let me explain. When the ticket is issued, it is assumed all investigations regarding the initial traffic stop have concluded, and therefore a dog is not relevant to the initial stop. But what the TikTok officer has somehow forgotten is that during the stop, suspicion of different criminal activity may arise. Remember when I suggested the officer might know a thing or two about determining reasonable suspicion of smuggling? That becomes incredibly important now, because the Supreme Court didn't rule a dog cannot be used. They sent the case back to the Eighth Circuit and said, you better make sure the officer had reasonable suspicion of something else that would require that dog. Something like, I don't know, smuggling contraband. So, The investigation of the incident leading to the initial stop is presumably over if that paper that the driver was handed was a ticket. But that doesn't mean all investigations have concluded. I understand that the general public might not know this. I get that. That's why I'm here, to try to help you learn. But it is inexcusable for other police officers to not be aware of it. Now, the officer in the video may have been wrong. It is possible there was no reasonable suspicion of another crime. I get that. And if we had more than 3 minutes of context, perhaps whatever led to that ticket, assuming it was a ticket, we would be able to accurately analyze the situation instead of saying, hold on a second, this might not be corruption and unconstitutional activities. But I would expect an officer to have the critical thinking skills to identify the potential complexities of the situation instead of poorly citing case law at me. If we take anything away from this, it's critical thinking, folks. Think about the situation. Recognize that there's an entire traffic stop missing. Understand the laws in play. Don't get your case law wrong. And until the next time, be good, stay safe.